When was the first time you heard somebody refer to house music?
Keep it locked for the next hour for some of the best house music around.
You're listening to Friday Night House Music Mix.
With your host, the music creator, Will Jackson.
Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. I am your host, Will Jackson. This is the official start of the new year, which is 2019. You are joining us here live at the EM3 Factory Studios in Kaiserslautern, Germany. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep it locked for the next hour. I am the music creator, and we're going to take it. We're going to have a little fun tonight. We're going to keep it classy and old school house music, disco house tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, we are having some technical difficulties here in the studio. Please bear with us. We will get the music started as soon as we can work out these glitches here. Of course, this is live, and this is something that is often the case of, I don't know, something that usually goes wrong here at the studio. And we have some of the new equipment installed here. So if you can bear with us, we will get the music playing as soon as we possibly can.
us a little bit about your introduction to music before you was a DJ. How your tastes were honed. What was the music? Who were your influences?
I think unconsciously, as a kid, growing up in the South Bronx, I used to sit in elementary school. I used to doodle, draw, sketch, anything, and so my folks, the best way to keep me quiet, give Frankie a pencil, and he's all good. And so what would happen is that when I'd come home from school, I'd sit there and the stereo would be on, my sister's stereo would be on, and I'm just listening to whatever music she's playing, or whatever, and just sketch it, and I would sketch all day, all night, and she's playing whatever, or I'm listening to whatever she's, and I think those were the things that actually probably was pushing me along, but I didn't realize it. I mean, everything from West Montgomery to Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66, a lot of jazz, and then, the Motown stuff that I would hear on the street anyway, so it was a lot of that. And by the time I got into high school of Art and Design, whenever I had to sit down and do homework, or I had to work on a project in school, I'm listening to music. But by the time I got into like the 11th grade, I learned what it was to go out and hang out. I'm running around with Larry Levan at this particular point, and discovering all these clubs and all this nightlife and stuff. So he took me to the loft for the very first time. There you have it.
So 11th grade, hanging out with Larry Levan. I mean, how old is someone when they're in
16, 17.
So you were hanging out with Larry Levan at the loft when you were 16 years old?
Well, I met Larry actually when I was 14. 14 years old. So I might have been still in junior high school or something like that. And by the time I got into high school, then I began to run the streets with him.
And he was DJing then?
No, neither one of us were DJing. What happened was hanging out at the loft. It was the first time I had hung out there. David Mancuso was planning on taking a vacation at the end of the summer, and the loft would have been closing. So there was another friend of mine that was working for Nicky Siano at the gallery, which was the loft's, I guess, direct competition, if you will, even though there was really no such thing. And he was getting ready to go. This friend of mine was getting ready to go into the Air Force, but he had spoke to Nicky and said, "Listen, I have a friend of mine that can take my place here, if you don't mind." And so Nicky said, "Yeah, well, I need someone here." And so then he introduced me to Nicky outside of David's loft that night. And I reported to work the following weekend. And the job basically was for me to set up the fruit bar and decorate, blowing up balloons, this, that, and the other, some of everything. And then I brought Larry there afterwards. That's how Larry came to work there as well. Right. And then Larry spent more time hanging out in the booth with Nicky. And I just kind of sort of hung in the periphery and stuff.
And was that when you started to DJ at the Bathhouse?
Well, it's interesting. While I was working at the gallery, at Nicky's gallery, T. Scott, who was playing at a club called Better Days at the time, and T. Scott was one of the big DJs in New York at the time as well, had asked me to come and play on Monday and Tuesday nights because he was playing 5 days a week, and now the club was going to expand and go 7 days a week. But he didn't want to do the extra day, so he asked me if I would come and do it. Now, mind you, I had never played records at that particular point. Granted, I hung around the booth. I hung out with Nicky. We were close. But Larry worked more hands-on than I did, and T asked me if I would come and do it, and I was like, "Listen, I don't have any records. I can't do it. I don't think I have the ability to do it." And he was like, "You know all the music. You can use my records. I'll let you use my, that kind of thing." And I was like, "Well, if you think so." But I could use the money as well, you know what I mean? Because I'm in high school. I mean, I'm young. There are things I want to do. I want to look cute. I want to be fabulous like everybody else, So I took the job. I did it for about 6 months, and then they shut the night back down because they said there was no one coming.
So, you moved to Chicago. Why the move to Chicago?
Well, after I left Better Days, I worked at Continental Bass for like about 5 years with Larry. And I went there as Larry's light man because Larry got the residency. And so he invited me to come and do lights for him. And back in the day, that's how you got a job. If you're going to work as a DJ, if you can get a job as a light man, then you can ultimately become a DJ one day because you're right there with the music all the time anyway. And sooner or later, the DJ's going to have to go to the bathroom, and he might not make it back in time. So you might have to change that record, and you better know how to do it. So that's pretty much how it happened. But while we were there, a couple of years after we were there, we were working with Richard Long as apprentices. So he was teaching us everything about sound. And he didn't do the sound system. He didn't install the sound system for Continental Bass, but he taught us everything about it. Because his theory was, listen, if you guys are going to play music, then you need to know how to drive your equipment. And you need to know everything about it. It's like being a mechanic. You need to know what you're dealing with. So that we wouldn't kill people on the dance floor, that kind of thing, or sever their heads because the hides are too much of this, that, and the other. At the same time, Richard was ultimately turning his showroom into a nightclub. And he asked Larry to do the residency there. So Larry left, and I ended up with the residency at Continental Bass. But to backtrack a little bit, just to answer your question, Robert Williams actually wanted Larry for the warehouse in Chicago. I was second choice, but I didn't mind.
Okay.
I had nothing else to do. I mean, at that particular point, Continental Bass had went bankrupt. It closed down. I mean, I was playing different places, but I wasn't happy anywhere that I was at.
And at what point did the soundtrack of the warehouse evolve from disco, salsa, Philly International into house? And what was really the catalyst for that?
If to look back on it now, it probably became more visible by the time I opened up the power plant, by the time I left the warehouse and opened up the power plant on my own. It was pretty well defined then. I had already met Jamie. I'd already done my first remix. And around me, people like Steve Silverly and Marshall Jefferson, these guys were working on tracks of their own. And a lot of them had put out a lot of tracks long before I put out anything.
Right.
Yeah. But that's what they were. They were just a lot of tracks that...
So was it just a moment in time when a lot of producers all of a sudden were influenced by the same thing? Technology kind of happened, and all of a sudden this style of music was being made simultaneously. I mean, were these people connected? Did they speak to each other, or were they all making the music independently?
I don't know how well any of them knew each other. I mean, apparently they would all hang out at the warehouse, and I didn't know. I mean, the warehouse was only open one day a week. It was on Saturday night, and all my focus went into that Saturday night. And I mean, I'm playing from midnight to noon the next day. And occasionally I would do, a marathon where it's like 24 hours. You know what I mean? I did that maybe 3 or 4 times. But all those guys were hanging out. I didn't know. I didn't know who they were at the time. And apparently they were watching me pretty close. But a lot of the music that they were trying to put together was based on a lot of the stuff that I was playing. By the time I had done the remix of Let No Man Put Us Under for First Choice, things had turned around at that point. I'm also working in a record store. Then I meet Jamie. Started working with Jamie. Jamie came into the record store one day with his cassette and asked me if I would consider producing him. And I had never produced anything other than that one remix before that. But I told him, I was like, if you trust me enough to do it, then I'll take the leap of faith. Why not?
There's a story that I read actually in a book by Cheryl Garrett.
Cheryl Garrett.
You remember her? She was a
really close friend of mine, and I don't know where she's at in this world.
In the book it really quotes that when everybody entered the warehouse, they were given an acid tab. And during the course of the night, now this may be true, I'm just asking you if this happened, because it's a great story. Everyone was given an acid tab. Whether they chose to take it or not is another thing. But at one point, you would just completely stop the music, cut all the lights, so the room was pitch black, and there would be the noise of a train going through the sound system, and everybody freaked out.
That's half true.
That's half true.
That's half true. One, no one was given a tab of acid when they came through the front door. Now, they sorted that out on their own. But I did a lot of environmental things in that room. I could be very experimental with it. So there would be points in the evening where, the energy level is so high, that I felt maybe I need to give these people a chance to catch up to themselves. So the song that's playing will fade out, or it would fade right into a rainstorm or something like that. And then we turn on the exhaust fans. and the heat in the room would just completely disappear. It would just cool off, and people felt like they were actually in the dark in a rainstorm. So you can hear it, and then all of a sudden you hear the thunder and this, that, and the other, and it would get really, really intense. And then as the rain began to subside and stuff like that, you can hear a train in the distance. And then all of a sudden, it would just like come right through that room, and people go running, but they would run into walls, they would run into themselves. You know, they couldn't see what they were doing, they couldn't see where they were going. But, you know, in the cold light of the morning, the next day when it's all over and done with, people are standing around outside just talking about that train, that rain. You know, and sometimes I'd have to wait for people to really leave because I couldn't get out of the club because they would just rush me. Some of them loving it, some of them lost their minds on it, you know, especially if, you know, if they're tripping like that. You think you're really seeing these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it was half true.
Okay.
Or partially anyway.
Actually, yes, that embellishes it just perfectly. And so you moved to New York at that point. You moved back to New York?
Shortly thereafter.
And the next kind of phase of your career, I feel, started with the productions that you were involved with.
Well, I did a little bit of production in Chicago before I left.
Understood.
You know, I mean, the original version of Move Your Body, I mixed that for Marshall Jefferson. And then there was a host of little small records that came out on tracks that I had done. You know, I mean, I never got paid for any of that work, but the education was the pay. You know what I mean? I figured the more time I can spend in the studio and the more time I spent there, I would learn and I would eventually be able to take that somewhere. So by the time I left Chicago going to New York City, record companies and A&R people were coming out of the woodwork asking me to do things for them. And I just happened to get in at Def Mix on the ground floor, coming through the front door with all of this. So it balanced out.
So that was how your association with Def Mix started. And obviously for people that are, you know, Def Mix was a production, remix, DJ organisation.
I'm a trouble man, changed by the things I do. True, but it's funny now. They all remember you. It all could be different. Time to do something new. We're giving everything. Oh, to be a happy man too. Gotta understand. Blamed by the friends I lose. Who's getting out of hand? You think they depend on you. It all could be different.
Thank you so much for your patience. We are back online.
Buy yourself a dream. How's it looking? Buy yourself a car and a house to live in. Get yourself a good.
Once again, this is
Buy yourself
EM3 Factory Friday Night House Music Mix. I am your host, Will Jackson.
Gonna run around, strange, but it just won't do. No one is coming down, taking a hold on you. It all could be different. Try to do something new, giving everything. I want to be a happy man too. Buy yourself a dream. How's it looking? Buy yourself a car and a house to live in. Get yourself a good.
Friday Night House Music Mix.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Excuse the mix-up. We are here live at the EM3 Factory Studios in Kaiserslautern, Germany.
Saturday morning, Friday's enemy. Housework is calling me, but where to begin? Kids are out of school, trying to find a friend. Everybody's busy.
You're listening to Friday Night House Music Mix. to Friday Night House Music Mix.
This is an ultrasound mix.
This is Suad House Minds, and I love it. Listen to Will Jackson's house music mixes. sounds so good. You're listening to another fabulous Friday night house music mix.
Come
ultrasound mix.
much once again for joining us here tonight. Once again, we got off on a rough start. But you know, I guess it's something that you can expect from a live show. Of course, once again, you have been joining me here live in Kaiserslautern, Germany, at the EM3 Factory Studios in Kaiserslautern, Germany. Once again, I have to thank you so much for staying with us. We look forward to being with you again for another fabulous Friday night house music mix. Of course, I am the music creator, Will Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Be safe and stay warm.
You are listening to a Friday night house music mix.